Traci, thank
Hi,
you. Hi, thank you so much for joining me again.
thanks for having me again.
And I guess I might as well tell the audience right away that, I booked you for last week and we had an awesome session and it was fantastic and such a great conversation. You gave us so many good tips. And then I realized I made like the ultimate rookie mistake and I hadn't clicked record. So we're back
It
again
happens.
and
Here we
let's,
are.
yeah, so we're well warmed up and rehearsed
We're
from
just
last time.
perfecting it now. We're just
Exactly,
perfecting.
exactly. Actually, it was on purpose. I just didn't tell you that I
It was a trial run because you knew I
exactly.
was so nervous.
Yeah, totally, totally. Um, have you been up to any cool photography since we talked last?
You know, really what I've been focused on
Uh-huh.
right now are barn owls.
Yeah.
I've just really been spending as much time as I can, which isn't as much time as I'd like,
Hmm.
but as often as I can, I've been spending with the barn owl family. There
Nice.
are five owlets that have pretty much all fledged. There's one that's still kind of hanging around the nest box, but it's not going to be there much longer. I think it can be gone. It just needs the confidence to know that it can go.
Yes.
So that'll be coming to an end soon. And then I want to get focused again on elk. I really want to see elk and velvet.
Oh yeah.
So I'll be working on that here shortly. I
Yeah,
hope.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Um, is there a good spot, for elk, or do you go out and kind of try to look for them, or what do you do?
There's a great decent sized herd here in Pennsylvania, in Benezet, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
My dad has a cabin about an hour north of there, and there are some smaller herds in the more rural areas, even from outside Benezet. So I usually spend my time up there
Very cool.
and just drive around, look for them early morning, late evening.
Yeah. There's we have lots of them here. I mean, there's the yard is full of deer. I can basically go out and pet them and stuff. But finding elk here is kind of difficult, and it's kind of I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So I was just curious to see.
Yeah. Summertime, they like the deep woods, dark woods
Yeah,
where you escape the heat and the bugs. So,
yeah,
but early morning and late evening, you
yeah.
can usually find near a water source.
Okay,
So
yeah, yeah. I got to get
that's
out
what
and
I
do that.
work on.
Cool,
Hmm.
cool. So Traci, I invited you for the interview because you're one of my favorite photographers, and there's many things I admire about your work, but two things kind of stand out to me. One is the consistency. I think every time you publish or you post something, it's just you nailed it. It's just spot on, and I that's something I respect a lot with photographers who kind of keep a high level consistently.
Thank you.
And part of that also for me, one of the things that stands out, and part of the consistency I think is your composition, which never fails to amaze me.
Thank
There's
you.
I've never seen you post something where I'm like, oh, that's kind of an odd decision, or oh, it's always I'm always
It'll
like, yeah,
happen.
yeah, that really works. I got to try that myself.
Yeah.
So I was thinking today we could talk a little bit about the composition,
Sure.
and maybe you could give us some tips. And I thought that could be a good topic because I know for myself that's one thing I spend a lot of time kind of uh,
Yeah.
thinking about, and I think also for a lot of photographers it's difficult to do.
Yes.
So maybe we could start by could you kind of share what go through your mind
Sure.
if you're if you have, for example, a barred owl sitting there in front of you, or an elk
Yes.
standing there, some beautiful landscape, kind of what
Right.
goes through your head?
So, I think, when we look at an image and we're deciding what makes this image good, and, light is a big thing. Great golden light or lack of it, blue hour even I love.
Mm.
You look at the subject, maybe you look at the perspective, and then how it all comes together in the composition in the end is really what makes or breaks the image. Because to me, you can have a great subject and you can have amazing light, but if it's not sitting in the right place in the frame, you just kind of lost
Mm.
it. It becomes weak. So composition is something that I think I spend a lot of time on. I think you and I talked before about how you're kind of moving the subject around in the frame
Yes.
and trying to decide where should it sit. But I think you need to start thinking about composition in the field.
Yes.
So whenever I'm out there, I'm always looking what's in the background.
Mm.
What am I seeing beyond the subject? How am I going to want this to look in the end? You start thinking about, because sometimes, that center focal point or group is not always the best choice. Sometimes you decide, I really like how this foreground blur is, so I'm going to want more space to the right or to the bottom. And so you move your focal point around in your camera so that whenever you go back to edit, you don't run out of space.
Yes.
So because I've done that a lot. I've also done it where, I'm thinking this is where I want it to be in the field. So I'll move my focal point quickly and I'll fire off some shots. And then what happens when I actually get the shot is maybe it turned its head.
Yes.
So now I do move my focal points around a lot. I'm always checking back of camera, and then I shoot loose so that there's space for those adjustments.
Yes. I think that's a great tip too, because I think also maybe especially for people who are just starting out, I think the tendency is how tight can you get?
How close can I get? Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's definitely, I mean, I still do that. And I think there's definitely,
absolutely.
I think there's examples where that works, but I also think that, it's a serious limitation if kind of that's the only place your mind goes. It's like, how tight can I crop it? So I think that's really, really good advice.
Yeah.
I think, well, I'm just talking about my own experience here, but I think it happens to a lot of people, and maybe you recognize it, but it seems to me that it takes a bit of experience kind of before you can kind of free up enough like mental bandwidth to be able to kind of see what's going on. It seems like in the beginning,
there's a lot happening.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like,
there is a lot happening.
It seems in the beginning it's like, oh, I got all these settings, I got this tripod, like, and I think also maybe for the first 6 months or a year or so, every time you actually have something in the viewfinder, you're like, oh my God, there's something in the viewfinder.
You freak out, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for how to kind of maybe accelerate that process, or how do you get to the point where you kind of you have that extra headspace that is not just like panic?
I try and slow myself down a lot. And I have like this little phrase I repeat to myself is practice the pause, practice the pause. And for me, what that means is, I get to the field, maybe my subject is there, and you take those couple shots because it may not be there 30 seconds from now.
Yeah.
So you get those shots, but then you have to pause. You have to take a step back, check your back of camera, see how that looks. Is there an obstacle? Are you shooting through something that's obstructing it? Would a step left or right make a difference in the angle? Would it clear or free up the background so that it's a little cleaner? Or would it include more environment? If the environment is beautiful, would it include more if you took a step back? So I think taking a moment to pause in the field is huge. Sometimes I forget because we get excited and stuff is happening so quickly and it's changing, but those times whenever you can just say to yourself, practice the pause, step back, look at the back of your camera, see what's in the foreground, see what's in the background, would a step change things, would going lower or higher help? And the pause is also important for the subject. How is your subject reacting?
Yes.
Is it an owl, or that's it's raised its head and it's twitching, it looks like it's about to flush. It happens to everybody. It's we've all done it, but you learn from that. Same thing with with an elk or an antlered subject. Is it snorting? Is it stomping a foot? Is it racking its antlers in the brush? Those are all signs that maybe in that pause you need to recognize that and back off for your own safety in those situations. So pause is important.
Oh, for sure. No, there's I think there's so many good pieces of advice there, but yeah, I agree that the pause I think is important. I'm I don't know if you call me hyperactive. I have a lot of energy and not necessarily a ton of patience. So that one is really important for me. But I also feel like in general, if you're out taking photos, or if you're just nature in general, I think the whole slow down just goes a long way. You hear more, you see more.
You do.
Everything. And also, I personally find that it's kind of my escape from everyday life. So I don't want it to be hectic.
No, yeah, and that pause just forces you to, sometimes I'll even just take a couple deep, slow breaths because I don't know how you feel, but I feel sometimes that the subject can feel your energy,
Yes.
and
sure.
I feel like if you're all keyed up, sometimes that, you know, that translates. So that taking a step back and taking a deep breath sometimes really just kind of helps with a lot of different things in the field.
Oh, no, I agree 100%. I mean, I think we have massive influence on the subjects, and that's also one of the reasons why I think you're probably the same. I shoot alone 99% of the time I'm out there.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's just a different experience, and I think if you're two, I mean, sometimes, for example, with owls, even two people I find is enough that something just happens.
Yeah.
And then I love your advice about taking, for example, one step to the side.
Yeah.
Which
It
I
can
think
make a big difference
it's
sometimes.
crazy. It's insane.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then also, I guess the pause. Another thing that I find, and I'm finally getting there now, is kind of also uh, there's so many settings on your camera on the camera.
Yes.
I'll change something. All of a sudden, you're on manual focus instead of auto or something, and
Mhm.
like every time it doesn't do it, I'm like, the camera's broken. It's done.
Nice.
Ah! And then
It's
you fix.
broken. Shut it off. I'm done.
Oh no, it's just that little setting there. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
but
And light changes too. Light can change so dramatically, so quickly that, that if you're not paying attention to the light and what's happening
yeah,
around you as you're shooting, I mean, I've been shooting on beautiful sunny evenings and have the sun drop into a cloud bank, and I lose a couple stops of light, and those adjustments are necessary to get your image exposed well. So
yeah,
there's a
for sure.
lot.
Yeah, no, that's another very, very good point. Do you shoot auto ISO or manual ISO for the most part?
I shoot in manual but auto ISO.
Yeah, me too. Me
And
too.
then I will do over or under exposure adjustments as I'm shooting.
But I,
So,
I think that in itself is a really good tip right there. I mean,
mhm,
like you're saying, just stay on top of it.
mhm.
And I've had that so many times where I forgot to check, and like you said, the light changes, and you come home, and then it went from perfect exposure to just
Yeah,
increasingly horrible exposure. Yeah.
yeah, or your ISO spikes really
Yes.
high. You're shooting along it, and maybe it's already low light, and so you're 3,200 or 4,000, and then something happens, and you're like 6,400 or 8,000 or something ridiculous. And if you've managed the exposure, you can work with it, but I just rather not work in those higher ISO numbers at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Me too. I'm somewhat fanatic about keeping low noise, and sometimes to the point where it's a mistake in the sense that
Yeah.
I was like, I could have dealt with, like, ISO being 500, whatever points, whatever the hell it's called, higher,
Yeah. Mhm.
and have a little bit more shutter speed rather than come
Yeah.
home with the blurry photos I came home with.
That's a delicate balance, and that's something I'm constantly thinking, especially like as I've been photographing these barn owls because they don't come out until 8:45, 9 o'clock at
Mhm.
night. So I'm starting off at a shutter speed of anywhere between 1/10 and 1/40th. And then it becomes this little game of, the ISO spiking, the shutter speed's going down, but how low can I go before I really just don't get the shot anymore? So you kind of have to sacrifice something, gets sacrificed there. And if shutter speed is sacrificed too much, then you're definitely not getting anything,
Yeah.
but that's something I toy with all the time.
But I think also you're touching upon something there that I think is important as well, as far as choosing the right equipment. Because if you're shooting 1/10 of a second, I assume you're not hand holding; you'd be on a tripod.
On a tripod, yes. Hmm.
And I think maybe that's one of the things also that sometimes I think maybe people forget that it's not just personal preference. Like, I hate tripods; they're stupid. And but you're
Oh, I
like,
hate them. I don't like them at all, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
But
don't like them at all, but you have to have them sometimes.
exactly, exactly, and I think sometimes maybe people don't realize that it's the right tools for the right
It is.
circumstances rather
Mhm.
than a kind of a lifestyle preference. I don't like
Yeah.
tripods.
Yeah. Especially whenever, when you're setting up somewhere for an extended period of time, if I go somewhere and I know the subject and, it's just a matter of time before I see it, I'll get there an hour to an hour and a half before.
Yeah,
And you're just standing there. Well, I'm not going to stand there and just hold my camera and then if something happens. So I set up, I have my camera set up, I have my focus preset. If my shutter speeds are getting really low, I'll use a cable release so
yeah,
that I'm not,
yeah,
for some of those 1.5 second exposures,
yeah, yeah.
it really makes a difference
Oh
to
yeah.
to have the cable release. So, in those situations, I will push it sometimes and handhold way slower than I have any business doing. But you know, for
Yeah.
those times whenever you're set up on a subject, I think having a tripod is just ensures it's a better insurance that you're going to get something that's going to be sharp versus hand holding
Yes.
and waiting it out.
Yeah, and if you're doing any kind of video, also, it's, hand holding is more or
It's a
less out.
must.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, as far as composition, do you think that plays a role also in creativity, as far as how creative you can get with your photography?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that to me, in an image, composition is everything. I mean, honestly, I think that it doesn't matter how creative you get with light or perspective or angle. Again, if it's just not sitting in the right place in the frame, then you got to go back and do it again. It's just and I do this a lot with composition where um, I'll compose or edit an image, and then I leave it up on my screen and I do all the edits I'm going to do, but I'm not sure. So I walk away from it for a day or two,
Yes.
and then I go back, and when I turn my computer, fire it back up again, and I pull up that image, instantly I know, okay, it needs to be moved a little lower left or a little higher, or even your color adjustments. That's too dark. I need to brighten it, or
Yeah.
it's too
Yeah.
warm. So I think that taking a step away from your image as you're editing and giving yourself some time, freshen your eyes, give yourself a break from it, because we can get so engrossed in it,
Yeah.
and especially if you're editing when you first get home from a shoot.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I'm somewhat emotionally invested in those images because I know I just stood there for 3 hours. I know maybe I got a look in my mind that was great, and then I come home, and if I download right away, I'm still attached to that feeling.
Yeah.
And if you give it a couple days and then download and then look at it, or even wait a couple days before you finalize your edits, things become more clear, and you
Yeah.
can say that really isn't as great as I thought it was,
Yeah.
because you have that time for that emotional attachment to it,
Yeah.
to slow down. So
Oh, I think that's such good advice. I mean, I usually don't edit right away, but I often can't wait to do a sanity check,
yes.
So I
Hmm.
might just do a quick, just get them up on the computer. I'm not gonna download them really or edit. I just do kind of a preview and just go
Just
through.
a scroll. Hmm.
Yeah, and then sometimes you're like, oh, damn it, oh, it just wasn't there.
Inevitably, yes.
Yeah. Or you
Hmm.
go like, oh, this is much better than I thought, or kind of, yeah, I got something to work with here. But just
Yeah, or
that
one
kind
that
of,
you didn't. Yeah.
yeah, that kind of sets my mind at ease. But I think it's like the best possible advice, almost like you said, is giving it a break. And I
Walk
find,
away from it. Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I find that so helpful. And I think, I guess if you're desperate to get photos up on Instagram, whatever, then well, do it. But I've been
Yeah.
amazed, especially with colors. Like sometimes I've been looking at it for so long,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is perfect. And then I come back 2 days later, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking, man?
Oh yes. Oh yes. And I do that with color and brightness.
Yeah.
Not just composition, but the color and brightness. A lot of times I can be like, wow, that's, I need to pull the saturation back on this channel, or, brighten it up a bit, because maybe I already brightened it when I first edited it, but then, and I feel like I've brightened it. But then when I go back to it, I didn't brighten it enough.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think downloading and then editing your what you feel are your best images, and then just walk away from them for a day or two. Go back with fresh eyes and see what your initial reaction is to it.
Do you have like someone you show your photos to, like send them over and get some feedback on, some sanity checking, or do you mainly just do it yourself?
I have, but lately I I really just do it myself,
Yeah.
because I'm finding that everyone's going to have an opinion,
Yeah. Yeah.
and or I will, if I do share it and I get that opinion, I listen to it, and
Mm,
sometimes it's helpful.
mm.
But at the end of the day, it's your image,
Yeah.
it's your edit, it's your translation of that scene in that moment. So I kind of like to keep that to myself, but
Yeah.
I do occasionally share an image and say, "Does this suck?" Yeah. just be real with me. Is this, am I, the same thing back to being emotionally vested in an image. I'll say, am I too attached to this image? Like, do I need to let this go? And that's my big thing, do I need to just let this image go? And I find now that if I am thinking that, I do need to just let it go. And that
Yeah.
it's not what I wanted it to be or what I had hoped it would be.
Yeah.
And just, so if I'm even asking that question now, I know, okay, just like,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It can be painful, but I think that's really important too, as part of your own personal development. And like just like you said, I mean, you can have this emotional investment, or maybe there's like this one corner of the photo you love, and then sometimes like, but I love this one piece so much. But then I think a big part of it is going like, yeah, well, that's one piece of the photo, and that's the other 90% you don't like. So yeah, letting it go. Last time we touched upon. I guess something that could be a bit controversial, but we talked about kind of a piece of advice being is to be hard on yourself, and I think that can be misunderstood. So we're not talking about like the hating yourself or just being going out of your way to be hard on yourself, but maybe rather than kind of making an excuse where it's like, well, I kind of love this, or it was a rare thing, then do the opposite and maybe say, well, actually, maybe look for what isn't so good, because then that can help you develop.
I think we have to be self-critical and self-aware. And I think that, I don't by any means have this figured out. I'm still learning every time I go. I make mistakes. And there's so much that I want to do to progress, to get better, to change my view, to change approach in what I'm doing. So, but I think that being self-critical is so important, that you have to be able to look at your images with an objective eye.
Yeah.
And if someone else sent this image to me, what would I think of it? What would I change?
Yeah.
So that self-awareness and being self-critical, not in an I hate myself kind of a way, but in a growth and development, in order to continue to improve kind of a way, constructive self-criticism.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, actually.
It is important, or we become stagnant. How do we progress on our work? How do we progress in our style? How do we continue to develop our style if we can't look at our own images and decide what we would do differently next time? Maybe it's not in a post-production end, but in the field next time, be aware of what you want to do differently.
Yeah, that's actually another piece of advice I think is very, very good. And I've done that a lot myself. Is you have one shoot, you come home, you're like, oh god damn, like it's fine, but now I know, like
all the time.
And I think that's part of definitely what keeps me going. Also, is I've accepted, and I love that aspect of photography. Is I'm going to be a student of this forever. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I'll be like, yeah, I got this figured out. And I think also maybe when you're kind of looking for ways to get better always, and you're curious about that also keeps you a little bit humble.
Yes.
Which I think is important, because I think there's if you show, like, a lot of people are not used to seeing an owl, for example, so any photo of an owl, they're going to be like, oh my god, it's
amazing. Yeah.
So I think it's pretty easy to find people who will tell you it's awesome. It's harder to find people who will be honest and hard on you about it.
Absolutely.
And then of course, I mean, I think it probably varies. I think people like you and me are kind of obsessed with this stuff, and we have this distant goal we'll never achieve of this perfect photo. And then there's other people where it's all they want to do is just go out and take a couple of photos when they walk.
And all that's good. I mean, I think that anyone who's spending time in nature, it's a good thing. It's good for the soul. It's good for your awareness.
It is.
And if you go out with a camera and you want to document, what you see and lights and different species and subject, that's awesome. Yeah. Like, I think to me, everybody should do it, because it forces you to slow down a little bit. You're not just walking through the woods, you're walking quieter through the woods. You're listening, you're paying attention when you have your camera in your hand. And then there's a different segment of that where you're looking to the art end of it. Yeah. So it means something different to everyone, but to me, it's all good, Heck,
Yeah.
if you're out there with your cell phone and you're taking pictures of the way the light is streaming through the trees, awesome, do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
I agree.
So
So I mean, I've been doing this for, I don't know, 4 years or something. So um, I kind of have, I jumped in, I got obsessed with this stuff. So it was kind of almost like from one day to the other, like, I love
oh
this.
yeah.
But one of the things that was amazing to me, regardless of whether it was photography that got me into it, the thing I'm so grateful about, and it sounds maybe exaggerated when I say it, but it just fundamentally changed my life for the better. Because
Absolutely.
not that I had anything against animals or nature before, but I didn't notice it to the extent I do now, and it just never fails to amaze me with my new ears and eyes that I have tuned in now. It's
Yeah.
just like my entire life up into this secret world was there. I just failed to notice it.
Yes.
And that to me is
Absolutely.
absolutely just magical. That I don't know, it's right up
It's
there.
amazing. And you know what? I go through these ups and downs with this where um, I feel like my work is stagnant. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of there right now. So you feel like everything's stagnant. This is the same. I'm doing the same. How can I change this? But at the end of the day, it's that time outdoors that's what it's really about. And then if I ask myself, why do I do this? Why do I go outside with my camera? Well, I love it. It's peace. There's an inner peace in that. I can see that this world is much larger than me. And then in sharing my images, I just want to connect people with nature. So there are so many people who just don't, in my opinion, spend enough time outside. And like you're saying, you have this new awareness of, those quiet times where you're sitting and observing, you get to see some amazing things. So if I can connect a few people or maybe spark an interest in the natural world, or maybe get them to go for a hike and spend that time outdoors, for me, that's kind of my goal with it, is to share my love for that time outside and maybe spark an interest to get more people
Yeah.
outside
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
see that
for
the
sure.
world is bigger than them.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, and also I think that's probably, the only way to, how do I say this without sounding like, oh, to save the planet or whatever, is to
No, I
be
mean
more
it's
aware. And
mhm,
I think that awareness comes through exposure and proximity.
absolutely,
I think you have to
absolutely,
be out there.
yeah,
And, you know, I find that any bird, if you observe it long enough, you will, kind of fall in love with it, because they all have their little personalities and they all have these secret
yes,
lives and all that stuff. And that's another thing that I love about this stuff is, if you just spend enough time looking at any living out creature out there, you will form some kind of a bond and want to protect it,
absolutely,
find.
absolutely. I believe that, and each one, even in the same species, they have different personalities, different
Yes.
levels of tolerance. Some are curious,
Yeah.
some are, they'll kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, who is this in my forest,
Yeah.
and and I also think that once you're out there in the field a little bit and you see something, so it's easy to say, oh, there's nothing here and I don't see anything. Well, just sit still and stay in one spot, and the birds settle, you know they come back,
Yeah.
they resume their feeding, you're still, you're quiet, you haven't shown that you're a threat. So things kind of flow back in.
Yeah.
Maybe a deer comes by, maybe you
Yeah.
see a raccoon or something,
Yeah.
but yeah, so taking that time to just kind of, again, the pause, it's the pause. Taking that time to just be still in it.
100%. And I think that's probably also one of the difficult things for a lot of people. It's definitely something that doesn't come naturally to me. But I've found when I can sit down in a hide or just sit down in the same place for a long time, that's usually where the cool stuff happens,
Yeah,
more than if I'm kind of just, hiking all the time.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where I have my patience. I am not what you would call a patient person generally,
Oh, me either.
but when it comes to wildlife,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's patience or stubbornness, or I just get engrossed in the moment, but I've sat in the same spot for 4 hours and not moved, and just, I'm just sticking it out. I'm not moving.
I think I've never thought of that before, because I've been pondering this also, and I'm not very patient, but I am incredibly stubborn, and I think you're absolutely right. I never thought to kind of flip it like that, but you're right. Yeah, it is kind of the stubbornness, like I'm gonna get it, And if I have to
Yeah.
come back 5 days in a row, I will.
Yeah. I'm going to stick it out. And then because you know, if you move, if you set up somewhere and then you see stuff over here and you think, maybe I should move.
Yeah.
The minute you move,
Yeah.
the minute it's over here where you were sitting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, pick your vantage point, and if it comes your way, you've been blessed. It's a gift.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, go back and do it again.
Yeah,
keep trying.
Exactly. That's another thing I have kind of. I guess that's where the patience things comes in now. I used to get really frustrated because I'd get my hopes up so high and be so excited. Now I get basically angry when it didn't work out, and then I wasted a lot of energy on that. And I think I sat down and had a conversation with myself. It's like, Michael, this is supposed to be fun and positive. You're not supposed to come home frustrated.
Yes.
You can't control nature, so it doesn't make sense to get angry at these things that are out of your control. Calm down and just try to have a good time anyways. You're
absolutely out. I've had those talks with myself too, and I've had those talks because I'll go and when you pack up your gear and you set your alarm for some ungodly hour, 3 or 4 in the morning, and you drive an hour and a half, or even longer, and then you hunker down in a location and it's not comfortable. It's not pleasant. Sometimes it smells depending on where you are, and so you're in this, not the most comfortable location at times, and you're sticking it out and there's bugs and, and you come home with nothing. It's easy to want to just roll down the window and toss your camera out of it on the way home and just say, why am I doing this?
100%. Yeah.
But, it can be frustrating, but then I have to change my thinking to, well, what did you see?
Yes.
What did you hear? Yeah. Maybe you didn't get the shots you wanted, but it's not just going to happen. It's never just going to happen. Yeah. So it's a struggle. I think it's something we all experience.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's there's kind of a masochistic element to it, like you torture yourself. But I think, there's certain species that have eluded me, and at this point, it's just kind of ridiculous. Like, statistically speaking, I should not be able to miss this one subject so many times. Yeah. But now I've gotten to the point where I just kind of laugh at it, and then I know that when I get that subject, perhaps in many years, it'll just be such an incredible experience, because I'll be like, it took me a decade or something like that.
And it'll just happen. It'll probably not even be when you're trying for it. It'll just happen naturally because it's on their terms, not our terms. We aren't the boss when we're outside. So I think and I say that it's always good to have that list of species that you don't have. You have those goal shots that you want that you don't have, and you have those species that you'd love to get that you don't have. And keep that tucked away in the back of your mind, and hopefully one day it'll happen.
100%. You sent me a couple of photos that we could look at and get your thoughts behind the composition and maybe the story behind the photos. So I will just share my screen and bring up the photos here. There we go. But I will start with this one. The wood deck. Such a lovely photo.
Thank you. That was, talk about research and planning. That's what that was. I spent about 2 weeks watching this location from a trail that was above. This is kind of a flooded woodland area, swampy. And there's a trail that sits on a hill above it. So I spent some time for about 2 weeks watching my watch. What time did the ducks fly in? What direction's the light coming from? And then noticed they fly in about 4:30. So the first time I went in, I didn't take my camera. I just put my waders on, slid on my butt down the hill into the swamp at about 2:00 in the afternoon, random time, not, obviously not going for shots, just to scout the area out. And I stomped all through there, and it's a mess. It's fallen trees, branches, limbs, black swamp water. It's gross. I like to shoot waterfowl from ground level.
Yes.
Could not find a spot where I could do that. but I like the light that comes in the afternoon, and I like wood ducks. So the day I went in with my camera, again, I had the tripod, the lens, the waders, the 3D camo, slid down the hill. So I knew they fly around 4:30. I got there at 3, slid down the hill, set up in front of this big old oak tree, set down in the water, got as low as I could, switched on to silent shooting mode, which in my camera puts me at 3 frames a second, which is painful.
Yeah.
Absolutely painful to shoot at. But I sat there and I had this most just mind-blowing experience. I never thought I would get that close to a wood duck, ever thought they would swim up to me, swim by me, and I got home that day and I was so excited. Like, I was riding a high the whole way home after I had that experience. I'm like, wow, that was, yes. I get home the next day, I download my images and I'm scrolling and I'm like, this is wrong. These are wrong. It's that whole emotional attachment that I had to the moment, and it was exhilarating. And I looked at my images and I wasn't happy with them. I worked with a few of them and edit, but it was one of those moments where I'm like, you're forcing it. You're trying to force something that's just not there. I need to get a little bit lower. So I went back a couple of days later when the light was going to be good. I got down in there. I got to the lowest I could get was about 6 inches above the water. And because there was the one open spot in this swamp, there's a tree that fell across it. And there are these warm grasses, little grasses that are growing up off of the log. So if I had been at ground level, I wouldn't have seen anything. It was a total obstruction. So I got down as low as I could. I scrunched down further. My waders filled up with cold black water. This was March, so it wasn't warm here. And don't you know, I set foot at 3 o'clock in that swamp, and as I set foot, a duck was coming in. I scared it. It scared me. Its feet touched the water. It splashed right back up out of there, and I thought, you blew it. No. You blew it. But I'm here, so I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna wait, because where else am I gonna go? And probably about an hour and a half later, I heard the squeaks as they were flying back in, and this drake cruised by at the edge of the swamp, and I shot through the grasses that the evening sun was hitting. So it was I had to change my perspective. I had to change my thinking because I couldn't get the perspective I wanted, but we have to be adaptable. So,
yeah, that's another piece of advice that I think is really important. You just gave there is kind of, being agile, thinking on your feet. Yeah. Changing constantly. And I didn't get this, I can do this instead. Yeah. And that's probably also where a lot of the, I guess, creativity and stuff comes from. Is like, oh my God, look at this kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, what can I do? I can't get ground level, but what I can do is use these backlit golden grasses as my foreground, and just do the best I could, because I wanted wood ducks. So.
For sure, and I think this is such a good example of beautiful composition, and also a more artful piece, because I think a lot of photographers, especially if you're kind of starting out. I would probably have in the beginning I would have tossed a photo like this and not even been able to see kind of the beauty and the artistic part of it, because I would be like, no, it's not a totally close up. But in this one, the duck is there, it's clear, you can see it perfectly. It's a wood duck, you get all of the wood duckiness, but you still get all the beautiful light and everything. And also, I think as far as something you'd want to hang on your wall, this is probably a lot more interesting than just really
I mean, and I think that's part of when you head out into the field, I think it's good to have a plan in your mind of what you want out of a shoot. Like what is your goal? What are you shooting for? What type of an image do you want? But I wanted that nice clean reflection, close. But it's a swamp. And it's messy, and there are leaves and debris and stuff floating on it. So I had to for the second time I went, change my thinking and my approach and find another way to make it happen. Because I had the location, I had the subject, I knew the light, but I needed to change my perspective and my approach to it all. So
yeah. Well, beautiful result.
thank you.
And this one I
Yes.
am particularly fond of. I think
Thank
it's
you.
such an awesome shot of the kestrel. And again, I mean, I mean, what is the kestrel? What, 1% of the photo or something?
Yeah.
But
He's little. He's little in there.
but it's perfect. He's right there, and
My
also
eye goes to him. That's
exactly the way you composed it. Like it's not. I don't start like down in the corner and be like, oh, I wonder. Oh, there it is. It's like it goes
I
straight to
think
it.
I think that's, and now that you mention that, I think that's part of the being self-critical is,
Yes.
can you pull your eyes back? And when you look at one of your images with fresh eyes, where do your eyes land? And to me, I want them to land on the subject and then study around the frame, see what
Yes.
else is happening, but go back to the subject. So I've had images where I'll pull it up and there's something else that's grabbing my eye.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a highlight, maybe it's foliage that's too prominent. So I think pulling your eyes back when you look at an image with your own image with fresh eyes, and just look at it loosely and see where your eye lands. So, and that in this one, I think it goes to the kestrel. This is on the historic battlefield at Gettysburg, and I love those old split rail fences.
Oh, they're beautiful. They're so cool.
There's just so much to them. There's so much character and history to those. I could take a macro lens and spend a day just focusing on the details of those fences. They're beautiful. And then the dry grasses, and and also he's a kestrel, so you can't get close to him. Know that they don't have any tolerance at all. So
yeah, they're hard. They're really
took
hard.
a couple steps right, to kind of get the fence and the angle, and left and be, and there he is.
And I think a good example here also of what we talked about before, and as you just mentioned now, taking a step to the right or left. If you'd been, I guess, a little bit more to the right, the branches in the distance there would kind of have interfered with the kestrel, but you separated that, so you have the nice background separation there. Which I think that's a good example of you. Such a cool photo. And another thing I like about it is I'm personally in wildlife photography, which is all I do. I don't shoot people or anything else or macro or anything like that. But I try not to have man-made objects in my photos.
Yes.
But stuff like this, I think, works because it's weathered to the point that it almost looks like it's part of nature, right? It's
part of the landscape there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been there for ever.
Yeah.
So it's old, it's weathered. I love the fence, and to me, it tells a story of this grassland bird. These are the grasslands where they hunt. You have those tall grasses. These are, they perch. They lift off here, they kite, they make their prey, they go back to these perches whenever they feed. So that's kind of tells a story to me as well.
And you can see from the whitewash also that it's not the first time it's been there.
No, it's not. It's part of the weathering.
Yeah. This one is really, really cool too.
Monetary warbler.
Yeah, very cool. And I love it's also quite a unique pose because the wings aren't out, but the tail is spread out nicely.
Yeah, that was just one of those, I don't know, lucky freak things that happened. I was in the swamp again for this species and have been watching a couple flitting around and singing, and I lost sight of him for a couple seconds, and I kind of peeked around the tree to see, and there he was, perched on this little limb. And I kind of leaned over it was on my tripod, kind of leaned over and took a couple frames with the tree in the foreground, kind of blurring it a bit. And here he was in this pose, and then he dropped down, and there was a female on the log below him.
Oh, wow.
They copulated. I was like, what is happening? Tried my best to get my camera flipped down to that angle, but there was just too much debris and foliage and tangle. So I saw it, but I wasn't able to pull that off. But I thought this was, a little bit different of a pose to catch him.
I love it. And then also I think the foreground blur works perfectly
Mhm.
because it's such a nice fade also to the perch there. It just kind of disappears. It's
Yeah,
very clean. I love it. It's beautiful.
thank you.
And also, yeah, the yellow contrast with everything works really nicely.
Thanks.
And then this guy here.
Oh, this was one of those adaptability
Yeah.
uh, shots. This was one of those ones where, we were on our last day. Our vehicle was loaded. We were getting ready to leave, and we head over to look for these owls once more because we weren't quite getting the looks we were hoping for. The prior day it snowed heavily. It was still a little bit snowing this morning, but we were hiking around the trails and saw this one perched in this snow-covered pine tree, and I'm like, I was on the trail. It was in the woods. Um, I'm not tall, so I wasn't tall enough to clear all of the brush and
Yes.
shrubs that were between me on the trail and this owl in the woods. I didn't dare move from it because I'm like, this is my last chance. We're leaving. Like, if I don't make something of this, so I uh, picked my tripod up in my left hand and held my camera with my right, and I got up on my tippy toes as high as I could, hoping I was clearing all the mess of the brush, and adjusted my shutter speed because I'm like, I'm not steady. This really isn't tripod mounted at all, and just kind of fired off a couple bursts, and then hoped that I got something. Um, I don't know that I would have had the branches on the side, but I kind of the tree on trunks on the side. But I like that they're snow covered. I like that it kind of sets him in that little pocket there. Um,
Yeah.
so that was it was a challenge in the field, and it was a compositional challenge for me. But yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm not,
Oh, for sure. But
so
also with a subject like that, with those eyes, they pull you right in. So
uh, yeah.
I kind of hadn't noticed the tree on the left till
Yeah.
you mentioned it.
Yeah, that was something I had to, in my own mind, kind of get over and let that go. I
Oh,
just,
I know that
okay.
feeling. I
But
know that feeling. Yeah.
yeah, it's long-eared out in the snow of this pine,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I didn't know at that moment as I was shooting, like I walked up and down that trail looking for a different angle. There was no other angle. I couldn't pull it off from the right or the left. Lower was definitely not an option. I had to go higher, by getting on my toes there. And, as I'm shooting it, I'm like, there was so much brush. I'm like, I don't even know if there's not something in front of his eye.
Yeah.
It was kind of that hazy kind of
Yeah.
post snow weather
Yeah.
conditions. And it wasn't until I downloaded it at home that I really knew that I cleared his face. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
all I care about.
Oh,
Clear
yeah.
those
Yeah.
eyes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
get
100%.
those ear tufts up, you know. So that was a challenge, but I was happy with how it turned out.
And I think again, great advice here. Also, you sometimes you got to go out of your way and try some crazy stuff to make it work.
Yeah,
And
you
also
can't let it go. Yeah, yeah,
and also what you've in the stories you've told here, one thing also that's clear is and I do that myself. I can't help myself. When you're out there, get down in the mud, right? Get up in a tree, or hold your tripod over your head, like you said. All these different things to get the shot. And I
yeah.
think, and again, people can do different kinds of photography and stuff. But I think if you're on a journey to become, you know, to, on the journey towards making arts, and always getting
Mhm.
better and stuff. I, I
Yeah.
I I don't see how you'd be able to do that if you kind of insist on standing on your 2 feet all the time and not getting dirty or getting hurt or or something like that.
If if
Yeah,
I don't come home dirty, that's my thing. If I don't come home dirty, I didn't do it right.
yeah,
I was lazy. If I come
yeah,
home clean, I did something wrong. you know,
yeah,
my dog always loves me when I come home because who knows if I was rolling in goose poop or what kind of dirt that I
yeah,
was, what swamp I
yeah,
was in or what I brought home with me. It's I just think you have to be quick in your mind,
yeah,
constantly
yeah.
reevaluating, and don't be rigid, you know.
No, I agree.
Don't
And
be
then,
rigid in your ideas of what
yeah,
you want for
oh
that
yeah,
day,
yes, yes,
and don't be rigid with your feet planted
yeah,
on the ground. You're mobile,
yeah,
your subject might not be where you want it, but what can you do to improve that? The
yeah,
composition, where it's sitting, and what the
yeah,
background is.
yeah.
So that lies within us. Mhm.
And then I think one of the best investments I've made, an ongoing investment that has nothing to do with camera gear, is actually decent outdoor clothing. You know,
Yeah.
so you can. I mean, like if you're in jeans and a cotton shirt and cotton socks, you know, getting down in the mud is going to be worse
Just
than
throw your clothes away on the way home. Just throw them
yeah,
away.
exactly. And it's been actually a big aha kind of thing for
Oh
me,
yeah. Hmm.
finding out like getting decent outdoor clothing so you can be comfortable when you're out there, even when you're in an uncomfortable
Absolutely.
situation.
You
That
know,
makes a big
quick.
difference.
I love quick drying clothes. You know, pants and
Yeah,
shirts that are quick drying because you can crawl around in low tide. You know, and by the time you hike back to your vehicle, you brush your pants, your shirt off, and you're dry. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, I'm good.
yeah. No, for sure, sure. Yeah, and wool socks. You know, even if they're
Oh, I love
cold,
wool
they're
socks.
warm. Yeah, me too. Uh,
Spent a small fortune on wool socks, right?
Me too. Me too. Me too. I
Mhm.
always look for them on sale. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess that's a sign that for me, anyways, that I'm getting older. Is like, you know, when you start getting enthusiastic about socks.
Oh, my wardrobe has changed dramatically over the past couple of years.
Yeah, me
Absolutely.
too. Me
Yeah.
too.
And my vehicle is now just one big camera bag. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
the whole back is just
yeah.
brushed or blind and throws and camo and it's tripod pieces and
Yeah, 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 yeah. Totally.
muck boots and waders and all kinds of random stuff now. Yeah.
A lot of empty coffee cups and
Water,
yeah, and granola bar wrapping in my car,
all
anyways.
that. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Before we round off, I wanted to talk about, or wanted to see if you wanted to talk about. You have a couple of different hashtags you've been using. One of them is women wildlife photography,
Yes. Yes.
and
So,
yeah, could you talk about that a little bit?
sure. Yes. So, Women Wildlife Photography was started by Sarah Devlin,
Hmm.
and she asked me to come on board to help her out as a moderator.
Hmm.
And you know, we had talked about it a couple years ago. Like, we really need to start a page that
Yeah,
supports women in wildlife photography,
yeah,
which you know most wildlife photographers are men. And because I think that and I know this is Sarah's angle behind it because she finally made it happen, thankfully, this past year. And there's nothing stronger than a group of women that encourage and support one another. I think that it's something we should be doing in everyday life and especially in this area. So
mm,
it's been nice to have a place
yeah,
where you know you can share images and you can connect with other women in your area or who have a shooting style that you like
yeah,
or a subject you know in wildlife.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
that's been great. It's really done well.
Do you feel like there have been more women getting into wildlife photography over the last years or so?
I think so. I think it's connected me with photographers that I didn't even know were out there, which I love. And another thing that I like is young female wildlife photographers. You know, there
Yeah,
are some
yeah,
of those out there that you know any young person in this. You know, when you see these
yeah, for
kids in their
sure. Yeah,
teens and
it's awesome.
20s,
Yeah,
you know, male or female, I just do what I can to encourage and support them because let's keep them out there. Let's keep them going. And, you know, it's to me, it's the best thing. I think everybody should do it. So,
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And it is,
yeah,
you know, awesome what you're doing here, and
it's
also,
been great. I really enjoyed it. And I'm so grateful to Sarah for starting that because, you know, like I said, we had talked about it and then it just kind of faded away. And then the one day she's like, I did it. I started a page, you know, on Facebook and on Instagram. Will you help me out? And I was like,
yeah,
absolutely. I'm
very cool.
all in. Let's do it. So it's been great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
It's been so much fun talking to you, and I'm so
I
glad we.
appreciate it. I really appreciate it. You know, like I said, I don't have this figured out. You know, those are my thoughts on it. You know, and the next week I'm out, I might completely change my whole thinking on something. But you know, that's where I am with things right now. So
Oh, I think this is a huge inspiration. I mean, hearing someone like you know, talk about like not the book stuff about composition
Yeah,
or
the
whatever, like the,
technicalities. Yeah.
but like the real stuff about how you think and what do you do out there and stuff. That I think that's extremely valuable, and also that kind of maybe it gives people inspiration, but it also maybe gives them some goals, for
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
and hearing you talk about
I
it like
think and
that.
just enjoy it. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing is to not, like you said earlier, don't make it stressful. It's not supposed to be stressful.
Yeah.
This is what we do for stress relief. This is what takes us away from the daily grind.
Yeah.
This is our serenity. So enjoy it. And if you go out several times and you're not coming home with anything, it's okay. Just
Yeah.
think
It's
about
part of
what
it.
you did see. Think about what you
Yeah.
did experience. So
Oh yeah, 100%. And also, I think we all go through dry spells. I just had a
yeah,
period of a couple of months that were horrible, and now it's just like so much.
that's awesome. It's good when you climb out of that.
I know it's weird because it feels like I get into these periods where it's like, and I used to think, it's because now I got it figured out. And then you get the dry spell, a decent serving of humble pie. We're like, I didn't have it figured out. This was just random.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Instagram, I assume, is a good place to
Yeah, I'm on
I know
Instagram.
that's where I follow you, but
yeah, I'm on Instagram and on Facebook. I pretty much post the same stuff. So, yeah.
I'll provide links to that. Thank you again so much, Traci. And
of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Take care.
That's the hardest part, is rounding off.
It is.